not real estate, and I want to thank you guys again for tuning in to today's segment. The segment that we're going to talk about today is on asset protection, and I have a special guest in the house today. We have Michael Wiggins. He is the founder and also an attorney for Assure Law Group.
Hello.
And he specializes in estate planning for families, which also includes business planning. And so, welcome, Michael.
Nice to be here, Peng.
And the first question that I have for Michael today is relevant because, a lot of my clients that I work with, besides the residential side, are also interested in, getting involved with multifamily investments or continuing to add to their portfolio. And why is asset protection important when they're thinking of getting started into multifamilies and investment properties?
It's a good question. I think the answer depends upon where in your financial life cycle you're at. Risk management and asset protection is not what I ever consider to be sort of a stagnant, stationary thing. It's all relative to the opportunity, right? So to put that in a different way, as you get older and you accumulate wealth and your portfolio grows, the saying goes that you win by not losing. Mm-hmm. That's sort of the mantra of risk management and asset protection, is that you win by not losing. So anytime you're investing in properties that are not primary residences, meaning you are going to be absentee in that property to some degree, there's always a risk that you need to cover. So whether you have one single family rental unit, whether you have 20 multifamily rental units, the answer is still kind of the same. You're winning by not losing. So risk management, asset protection, particularly in the real estate space, is essential. It's one of those things that we consider kind of a no-brainer. It's not a question, should I do this or should I not do this? For the investment to take some really solid steps, really it's not a question. Does that answer?
Yeah. So the next question I would have for you, Michael, is for investors to think, what are the different ways that, or levels of protection that investors should be thinking about?
Okay, that's a really good question, and I think the answer, as it always, depends.
Right.
There's risk management and asset protection. There's tools that we use, so it really kind of depends on your circumstances and your tolerances, right? LLCs tend to be a fairly common and straightforward approach to asset protection. Setting up an LLC and putting your rental property or properties into that LLC. General umbrella policies, general liability umbrella policies, are what I would consider to be sort of a no-brainer to asset protection. And then also, I think property management, how you manage the property day in and day out, is critical. It's always easier to avoid problems than it is to try and clean them up after.
Fully agree.
After the fact, yeah.
Now, I know some folks that I talk to, sometimes, because just for simplicity, they are, for their first couple investment properties, they are still holding it under their personal name, and they are increasing their umbrella policy to cover, hopefully, what they think is sufficient coverage across the investment properties plus the residential.
Sure.
Can you kind of talk through perhaps when does that make sense? Does it make sense, or should those folks be actually thinking about going down the route of owning each individual investment property under an LLC?
What does the org chart kind of look like as you move forward? That's another good question. I think it depends. So, number one, you can't put your own home in an LLC. It has to have a legitimate purpose. So if you're looking at your own home as being your investment property, which depending on how you look at real estate, I guess that's a prerogative, but
Yeah.
your only option would really be to have an umbrella policy, right?
Okay.
Because you can buy that because it attaches to that,
Mhm.
to your homeowners. Beyond that, it really depends on what the goal is for your portfolio,
Mhm.
right? I mean, I think if you're on track or you have ambitions to hold, this is sort of your job, this is your retirement plan. I think you need to be more sophisticated, and you need to be more forward thinking with it, right? And so having an LLC in place to hold a property is a really good idea.
Okay.
I think there's a level of sophistication to that, and I think there's a level of tax planning that can happen with that too. I think to really kind of get to the heart of it, asset protection is always do we stop something from happening,
Right.
or do we deal with it once it does happen?
Right.
So those are the two ways that I look at it. Getting an umbrella policy isn't going to stop a liability
Correct.
from happening, but it certainly is a way to cover the risk
Right.
pool, right?
Right.
An LLC is an actual way of isolating yourself from a particular exposure, right? And so it really just depends on the size of the portfolio, what kind of properties you have in it. All those things factor in how you're going to finance it, whether you have partners. All those things play into a role and play into the role that these risk management tools play
Okay.
in your real estate investment.
Got it. I think a segment that we probably should cover in a totally different topic, which is, we've only been talking about LLCs.
Sure.
And there's other types of entities, whether it be like S corporations, LLCs. LLCs are typically the most common, but it might even be worth a separate segment just to
Sure.
talk more in depth
Sure.
about the pros and cons of
Sure.
how you set up those
Yeah.
business structures. But I think another question I would have as a follow-up would be, how does one, as one's investment portfolio for real estate continues to grow, their first property, but they're on their 10th property, their 100th property, does one's philosophy of how they set up that protection evolve, or is it just one size fits all?
It's one size fits all. Yeah, and you're talking to a lawyer, right? So we're never big fans of the one size fits all approach. I think there are common themes that we see in asset protection work. I do think though that we've talked about this before, you and I. You win by not losing.
Right.
That's what risk management is. I mean, it's not the upside of the ledger that we're talking about. It's protecting the downside, right, of the ledger. And so it really depends on the risk, right? So what you need to do is you need to sit down as a real estate investor, and you need to think about what are your inherent risks here. If you're renting investment properties to non-family members in another state, that's a big risk factor, right? It changes the dynamic. If you buy a property and you're letting your son or daughters live in it while they go to college, different dynamic there, right? So it's hard to say that there is a one size fit all. It all is very circumstantial.
Got it.
For sure.
Okay. Well, I think that's probably all the time we have for today on this segment. I'm sure you guys might have additional questions. I'll be posting in the video segment additional contact information for Michael in case you have further questions. So thank you, Michael, for
You're welcome.
taking the time
Thanks,
to
Jeff.
talk to the audience. Thanks.